Hello and welcome to another edition of my creepy stories. Today I shall be reminiscing on the tale of Laughing Jack. It was a nice summer day. My 5-year-old son James was playing outside in the backyard of our suburban home. James has always been a quiet boy. He plays by himself mostly. He never had many friends, but he has always had a wild imagination. I was in the kitchen feeding our dog Fido when I heard what sounded like James talking to someone in the backyard. I'm not sure who it was he could be talking to. He could have finally made a friend. Could he have finally made a friend? Being a single dad is hard for me to always keep my eyes on my son. So I decided to go outside and check on him. When I went out into the backyard, I was a bit confused because James was the only person back there. He was talking to himself. I could have sworn I heard another voice. "James, it's time to come inside," I called out to him. He came inside and sat down at the kitchen table. It was about lunchtime, so I decided to make him a turkey sandwich. "James, who were you talking to out there?" I asked. James looked at me for a moment. "I was playing with my new friend," he said, smiling. I poured him some milk and continued to pry, as any good father would. "Does your friend have a name?" "Why didn't you ask him to have lunch with us?" I asked. James stared at me for a moment before playing. "His name is Laughing Jack." I was a bit taken back by what he had said. "Oh, that's a strange name. What does your friend look like?" I asked, a bit confused. "He's a clown. He has long hair and a big swirly cone nose. He's got long arms and baggy pants, with stripy socks, and he always smiles." I realized my son was talking about an imaginary friend. I suppose it's normal for a kid his age to have imaginary friends, especially when he has no real kids to play with. It's probably just a phase. The rest of the day went by as per usual, and it was starting to get late, so I put James to bed. I talked to him, gave him a kiss, and made sure to turn on his nightlight before I closed the door. I was pretty tired myself, so I decided to go to bed not long after. I had an awful nightmare. It was dark, as in some kind of run-down amusement park. I was scared, running through the endless field of empty tents, broken down rides, and abandoned game huts. The whole place had a horrible look to it. Everything was black and white. The prize stuffed animals all hung from nooses in the game huts, all with sick grins stitched into their faces. It felt like the whole park was looking at me, even though there wasn't another living thing in sight. Then suddenly I began to hear music play. The sound of Pop Goes the Weasel being played on a squeeze box echoed through the park. It was hypnotizing. I followed its tune to the circus tent, almost in a trance. Unable to stop my legs from moving forward. It was pitch black. The only light came from a single spotlight shining in the center of the big top. As I walked towards light, the music slowed down. I felt myself singing along, unable to stop. All around the mulberry bush, the monkey chased the weasel. The monkey, though twas it, all in fun. The music stopped right before its climax, and suddenly the lights shot on. The intensity of the lights was particularly blinding, so all I could see was a small dark silhouette shuffle towards me. Then another one appeared, and another, and another. There were dozens of them, all coming towards me. I couldn't move. My legs were frozen. All I could do was watch as the hunting figures drew nearer. As they got closer, I could see they were children. As I looked at each one, I noticed they were all horribly disfigured and mutilated, some with cuts all over their body, others were severely burnt, and others were missing limbs, even eyes. The children enveloped me, clawing at my flesh, dragging me to the ground and tearing inside me. As the children tore me apart, and I faded away, all I could hear was laughter. Horrible, awful, evil laughter. I woke up the next morning in a cold sweat. After taking a few deep breaths, I looked over and saw a few of James's action figures were positioned facing me on top of my nightstand. I sighed. James probably woken up early and put these here. I gathered up the toys and made my way to James's room. However, when I opened the door, James was sound asleep. I just shrugged and placed the toys back in his toy box and headed out to the living room. A little while later, James woke up and I made him his breakfast. He was quiet and seemed a bit groggy. Perhaps he didn't sleep well either. I decided to ask him about toys. James, did you put the toys in Daddy's room this morning? His eyes shot up at me for a moment, then quickly glanced back to his cereal. Laughing Jack did it. I rolled my eyes and responded, will you tell Laughing Jack to keep the toys in your room? James now finished up his breakfast, then decided to go play in the backyard. I went to relax in the living room and must have dozed off, because I woke up a couple hours later. Shit, I need to check on James. I was a bit worried. I'd been out for 2 hours and I hadn't checked on him. When I stepped out to the backyard, but James wasn't there anymore. I was getting nervous, so I called him out. James! James, where are you? Then I heard a giggle coming from the front yard. I rushed through the gate, ran to the front of the house. James was sitting on the sidewalk. I breathed a sigh of relief and walked over to him. James, how many times have I told you, stay in the backyard? James, what are you eating? James looked at me, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a handful of hard candies in all colours. This made me very nervous. James, who gave you that candy? James stared at me, not speaking. James, please, tell me where you got that candy. James hung his head down and said, Laughing Jack gave it to me. My heart sunk. I knelt down to look him in the eye. James, I've had enough of this damn Laughing Jack thing. He is not real. Now this is a very serious situation, and I need to know who gave you the candy. I can see my son's eyes tear up. But Dad, Laughing Jack did give me the candy. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. James had never lied to me. But what he's telling me is impossible. Make him spit out the candy and throw the rest away. James appears to be fine. Maybe I'm just overreacting. After all, he could have gotten it from Tom or Linda from next door, or Mr. Walker down the street. Either way, I'm going to have to keep a close eye on James. That night I put James to bed as usual and decided to go to bed early myself. Suddenly I was woken by a loud bang coming from the kitchen. I sprung out of bed and hurried down the stairs. When I got to the kitchen, I was horrified. Everything on the counters had been thrown to the floor, and our dog Fido hung dead from the light fixture. His stomach was cut open and stuffed with candy, the same type that James was eating earlier that day. My shock was quickly broken by a sharp scream coming from James's room, followed by loud crashes. I suddenly grabbed the knife from the drawer and moved upstairs with the speed that only a father whose child in danger could have. I burst through the door and flicked on the lights. Everything in the room was knocked over and tossed on the floor. My poor son was in bed, crying and shaking in fear. A pool of urine stained the sheets. I scooped